Why does Edward Poynter's lion frown? You see the lion there on the trolley. He's got Egyptians round about him and Israelites pulling the trolley forward. It's a biblical scene. It was shown at the Royal Academy in 1867, hugely popular. People felt that they could empathise with the suffering of the Israelites, and they could realise the veracity of this archaeologically informed presentation. Well, I've got a number of reasons why the lion is frowning, and I'm going to call the lion he for reasons which will become apparent. So, reason number one, because he wanted to get to the other side of the pylons. He wants to get through the gateway. This gateway, these are the pylons. The gateway through there is where the lion wants to get. What's the problem? Well, there are a number of obstacles. One is that distances aren't quite what they might seem in this picture. We've got the pyramids of Giza. We have the temple of Philae. We've got the obelisk of Heliopolis. We've got about 900 miles worth of geography crammed into this picture. So actually getting the last 100 yards might be tricky. And the critics at the time realised this because they recognised all these monuments. They commented on it. The second problem is that there might not be enough Israelites to pull that cart. In fact, the patron of this picture, the first owner, Sir John Hawkshaw, he was an engineer, and he was undertaking consultation work for the building of the Suez Canal. And he knew his stuff when it came to mass engineering projects. And he looked at the first version of the picture and said, I'm sorry, there is not enough manpower there to move that granite monument. And he persuaded Poynter to add in an infinite number of extra Israelites along, going out of the picture. Well, that causes a problem because the lion isn't going straight towards the gateway either, because of the extra manpower required. How are they going to make the turn to get into that temple? Okay, reason number two. Why is the lion frowning? Because the lion is mean. He is mean like the taskmasters who are working for the pharaoh, lashing the backs of the slaves. This one in particular is very gory, running with blood, picked out as a white figure among the Israelites. The pharaoh himself, in this instance, is here with his crown, and the lion is a representative of the pharaoh in certain ways, and that's why I'm calling him he. The names, the name of the original pharaoh for whom this lion was carved, Amenhotep III, his name is inscribed on the edge of the monument, and Poynter has reproduced these hieroglyphs with some accuracy. The inscription calls this pharaoh a lion of rulers, wild when he sees his enemies cross his path. And the lion in this way was always meant to be the very image of power and ferocity, associated here with the Pharaoh of the Exodus, who the Bible sets out as the one who caused the Israelites to work under duress and to suffer greatly. But what about another reason for the lion to be frowning? Maybe he's frowning because he's been reversed. In the drawing made by Poynter in blue chalk of the ancient Egyptian sculpture, the lion in the centre and at top faces the other way, is a left-facing lion, not a right-facing lion. Is he really frowning in this first encounter as well? I think this drawing shows the lion as somewhat more benign than in the painting. I just want to point out that at the bottom we see the lion, the lion facing the way that we see in the picture, but very faintly drawn in, and you'll see why in a minute. The painting emphasizes the shadow across the muzzle and the eye sockets, making the lion much more ferocious looking than in the drawing. But maybe the lion is frowning because he's been cloned. The almighty sculpture in the foreground has its corresponding lions in the enclosure. So further back in Poynter's painting, you see an array of 6 identical right-facing lions lined up on plinths which are being painted, far more than have been found in any archaeological site of this type of sculpture. That frown may also relate to the fact that in the gateway itself, I get my lefts and rights mixed up, the left-facing lion is going in to set up an array, join an array on the other side, equal and opposite, relating, I think, to the ideas of force and energy and engineering in this picture. But it could be that the lion is frowning because he's far too big. The lion from which Poynter made that drawing is in the British Museum, and the lion in Poynter's picture is made from the wrong sort of material. This speckled granite in the Proto lion in the British Museum, brought back in the early 19th century from Egypt, is made of this speckled red and black granite. In Poynter's picture, it's completely smooth and homogeneous, as if new made in a substance which is entirely uniform, like perhaps clay or plaster. The wonder of seeing the monuments was very important in terms of ideas of veracity for Poynter. He wanted to show that the truth of the Bible was evident to your eyes, and part of the wonder was the sparkling newness of it. He didn't want perhaps the ambiguities that arise from the mixed material here, and he didn't want the roughness for sure. And so you can compare the lion not just with the British Museum's right-facing lion, but also with the British Museum's left-facing lion. And you see that Poynter's right-facing lion is actually drawn from the British Museum's left-facing lion. He's frowning perhaps because he's been made part of a public spectacle in Victorian London. These 2 lions sculptures were on show in the British Museum. They were much admired, and it was one way for the Victorian public to gain knowledge and to sample Egyptian culture and monuments. But I think that he's frowning too because he's part of another mass entertainment phenomenon in Victorian London, and that was the Crystal Palace Egyptian court, where plaster replicas of the Proto lions were put at the entrance to the Egyptian court. So this opened in Sydenham in the early 1850s, and one newspaper said 6 severe lions guard the entrance that have a frightful stare, but their keeper, Mr. Bonamy, who was the Egyptologist in charge of the Egyptian court, who had them from his friend, Lord Proudhon, ensures us that they are entirely symbolical. So, a joking way of talking about their ferocity, but actually it was in Sydenham that the duplication of these lions into an entire series of 6, I think, because there were 2 more elsewhere in Sydenham. 6 right-facing and 6 left-facing lions were put in the public place of congregation. Another paper said that the crowds weren't to worry, these lions weren't about to spring on them, even though they jostled around them. So I wonder whether the lion is frowning because he's about to be towed away. I think that Poynter took his composition from this lithograph from an 1820 publication on the operations of Belzoni in Egypt and Nubia as he locates, disinters and transports monuments, taking this young Memnon's head, as it says in the letterpress, away now in the British Museum. So this kind of removal of the Egyptian monument by a crowd of workers, I think, suggests that. So I think that at the same time, that crowd of people suggests that the enslaved Israelites can turn on their captors, that there is an equal and opposite force happening in history, and that is part of the biblical implication of Poynter's story. The story of Exodus involves the reciprocal violence of the Israelites against the Egyptian forces, and then their escape across the Red Sea and the drowning of the Egyptian pursuers. And I think that in Poynter's pictures there are little hints of this being about to happen. There's one on the left where we see the infant in the Pharaoh's daughter's lap raising his whip, and this can be taken as the infant Moses, who will lead the Israelites out of Egypt in the Exodus. And the other is the young woman holding the whip, I think woman, of somewhat kind of black African appearance, sitting on the cart. She's fingering a whip, but the end of the whip is broken, and that strand of the whip has fallen on the ground behind the cart. I think that both of those figures, Moses and this figure with a whip, are equivalents of the lion in their way. One of them is the force that will meet the lion, and this is effectively what will happen to the lion as the lion has its power taken away. So I'd say just finally, the lion frowns because the story doesn't bode well for the Egyptians. The lion wanted to get to the other side of the pylon. He was frowning because he was mean, as befits a ferocious pharaoh. He's undergone very strange manipulations, reversals, magnification, smoothing out. He's been cloned or even cast and multiplied. He's been dragged away from Egypt to Victorian London, roped in to a mass Victorian cultural display. As an emblem of Egyptian dominance, he's surrounded by subtle signs of the throwing off of slavery. Thank you.